Good evening, everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizer of this conference for inviting me. I am very, very honored because it is a wonderful initiative in which the Italian Buddhist Union is starting a dialogue with society, accepts to dialogue with the problems of the contemporary world. So it is a heartfelt and admiring gratefulness I would like to express. I would like to talk about the connection between Buddhist thought and contemporary ecologist thought. This is a very difficult connection because it is a fruit of a recent discovery of two movements that have substantially been marginal minority movements so far, but have substituted what was a need of renewal, especially felt in the American and European society, of thinking in different terms. And this has been a fertile encounter, and it hasn't been easy. If we look at the history of after the World War, whatever is under the label of Green Buddhism was made of very heavy ideological prejudices and lack of comprehension, stereotypes, even positive ones that revealed to be terrible, just like the whole rhetoric of Orientalism, which has, in a way, fuzzed up Buddhism. So Green Buddhism has not been a Western project built on its own image. It was at the beginning when the great dreamers were coming, but we cannot say what this is today. Today I would talk about a new Buddhism, a Buddhism that is different and that has the courage to review in tradition and compare it with the contemporary world. This is the outlook to use when we consider Green Buddhism. It wasn't only thoughts about the relationship between man and nature, but the real thinking about the sense of our existence, the sense of self and the universe and our lives. So I would like to start with the dreamers because they are so nice. You know, they were the transgressive people, messy people, some kind of half crazy people, courageous and disruptors who had an advantage. They opened the way. They saw the way before others. Who were they? They go under the label of the Beat Generation. So we're talking about the 50s in America, California, of course. And so it is a very heterogeneous group. Kerouac, Ginsberg, a friend of Bob Dylan, Warren Gary Snyder, Pasqualato mentioned him on Wodo. They were artists who were transgressing in life, just like they wanted to transgress in the arts. They were doing it on purpose. And, you know, they weren't recognizing themselves in the society. In the 50s, America was winning, a dominating model with the opposition on the other side, the communist bloc. So America had the monopoly of the West. Let's not forget about this. And the ideology was triumphant. And against this triumphalism of American way of life, they say no. They see the bigotry, the moralism, hypocrisy, and poverty beyond opulence. They don't see an happy hand, which was given in all of the American movies, and they bring to the surface the malaise that was underneath. That's why they weren't very loved. All these movements have been dissident movements that were scolded and, you know, they were deviating. It was very easy to attack them they were taking drugs, they were very liberated in their sexuality, drunk from morning to end, vagabonds, it was very easy to attack them, but they knew that. So what I would like to talk about Kerouac particularly, because Kerouac is a model of this way of life. Kerouac is someone who betrays everyone. He's a bricoleur. He takes everything in a very confused way, makes a mix of cabal and mysticism, and so his discovering Buddhism is part of a generic discovery that he labels, and it's important to understand that, as a mystical experience. And we've seen before with Professor Pasqualotto, Gary Snyder, but Snyder had been to a monastery, had been to Japan, had some real experiences, but Snyder wasn't the model of these years. The model was Kerouac with all his mess, because his mess speaks to American society, which is not ready to receive such a message or a Buddhist message. And he's trying to give this message, but the label is Buddhist experience, Zen experience is a mystical experience. And he makes a dream out of it, because given the idea of mysticism means interpreting for that generation a free, childlike, foolish experience. This is how he sees Zen. And that's why he puts it together with nature, because the mystical experience that liberates him, and that's how he sees Zen, is beyond good and bad. So that nature is free, and I identify myself in nature. So this is the first link of the relationship between ecology and Buddhism. And so this is a beautiful idea, and I had shivers when I saw this, because it was the 50s. We lost nature. The metropolitan dream, the dream of New York. We lost nature because we have an illness of the soul. And these are the years of Cold War, of atomic danger, where there are different imaginaries of catastrophe and total destruction. And we've lost this. And he sees salvation in a crepuscular dimension, because he was transgressing all the time. He wasn't believing in good and bad of that society. And he finds the wild nature, the wilderness, as he was saying. So they didn't invent relationship between ecology, wilderness, and Buddhism. Of course, it wasn't created by Kerouac. It has very ancient roots. In fact, Kerouac goes back to a romantic myth of the wilderness, which is much more present in the culture than the Zen nature. But let's also not forget that there was a current through Suzuki, who was part of the Theosophic Society, of the dream of Tibet, the Buddhist Tibet, the peaks, the snowy peaks at the end of the world where the Mahatmas live. So we're talking about dreams, and the dreams speak to society, or at least to this group. So the myth of a nature connected to Buddhism is born there. And it is a religious myth. But in the religious myth, underneath, in the belly of Kerouac, not so much in his head, there was an idea that going back to the wilderness means going back to heaven on earth. So all these ideas are mixing in a very creative way. And he, for 7 years, goes on the road. And discovers the great American nature with an eye that will then have an influence on his Buddhist vision, which is my itinerary in the wilderness, in nature, in another world, is a challenge for an inner path of self-knowledge and self-revelation. So I and nature are one, something that can mirror each other. We're not at Indra's net yet, but these are the bases. So this is an human nature that is looking for. Is not looking for nature in your back garden. He's looking for canyons, for deserts, because he wants to have some sort of conflict, some challenge, some fight. And at the end, he will find that the challenge liberated him because it's been a different way of being, which wasn't the object of a canon, so he could do whatever he wanted with it. So this is the limit of this first impact between ecology and Buddhism. And it is a great limit because for Kerouac, the vision of nature is individualistic. Wilderness is something I build to my image. So the idea of emptiness is not there. The idea of anatta is not there. In that group of artists, there were probably a couple of people who had learned about it and understood it, but it's not something that speaks to the culture of the time. But a seed remained, and remained in a problematic way. Just think about how Kerouac interprets the relationship with nature. It has to be a spontaneous relationship, and on this spontaneity, he plays, and Zen says, it's an experience that goes to spontaneity. So he reads Suzuki, the spontaneousness of the mystic. So this was a cultural reference, a limited cultural reference. For him, spontaneousness was like a childlike, free, innocent. And this is the way he was seeing nature, with the innocence of the Eden garden, before the apple, before discovering the good and the bad. Whereas in the Zen tradition, this is a final result of a progress that is challenging, that is difficult, that is exhausting, that is full of discipline, which excavates, where you have to lose your ego. And at the end, there is the essential gesture of spontaneousness. Spontaneousness for Kerouac, for any Buddhist teacher, was something that wasn't innocent, wasn't meaningful, and it was full of ego. And there was this egotism. Nature was, in fact, labeled under a Buddhist filter, but it was an illusion. But it's good to talk about it. It's right to talk about it, because this illusion is an illusion that doesn't go away. In Buddhism, in America and Europe, Buddhism goes through these misunderstandings. And now it's been reinvented, but they are being creative in their betrayal of Buddhism. So we have to take this into account, how this started, because in their transgression, they say to the society, I'm disrupting schemes, I'm disrupting patterns, but the same patterns are to be found in their egotism, childlike attitude, this sort of on the road path of the New Age spirituality. Go on New Age sites or religious sites. There's so many in the contemporary images have taken exactly the same topics as the crazy artists of the Beat generation had imagined them. So if we talk about Buddhism in the contemporary world, we're not only talking about texts and teachers, we're talking about life and its languages and its beauty and its betrayals. So when a Nai speaks, it speaks in a complex context. So I would like to highlight that when Alenais, who was one of the great ones, if you talk about green Buddhism, you cannot not mention Alenais, because he gives he gives a breakthrough, but a breakthrough wouldn't have been possible if he only wrote and spoke from his heart. The society had changed, and where have the changes happened? This is what the beats didn't want. The texts are translated. Buddhism goes out of the small passe of academic Orientalists and starts speaking in a critical way to a widened base of readers. And there's a whole generation of Buddhist teachers, not only Zen, of course, but also esoteric Buddhism, tantric Buddhism, and they found their communities, and they order some monks, they've been ordered in Japan, they order some monks, but they are no longer faithful to to their tradition. And we're talking about the 70s now, and we're starting from dreamers, then ecologists who have been inspired by Buddhism and get to Buddhists that speak about ecology. This is where the change is. So it's starting from the United States, and it now becomes a game of global instantaneous reflections, a contemporary dialogue. So where I was thinking about this when I was wondering what attracted them at the beginning, these innovators. How did they meet? Because there was a lack, a question that American society was asking itself. Pain, the sense of evil. This happens when traditional institutions are no longer able to provide answers to the new questions on suffering, on pain. They give old answers. They're not saying anything anymore. And the concept of evil we had 20, 30 years ago, what was the answer? And let's go back to America of the 70s. Can we remember the Vietnam War on the news? And you would see they were shouting their pain all day long, all these young people in this dirty war. And then there was the pain for racial imagination, social movements, going against racism, Martin Luther King. But the answers are no longer good. They're not saying anything anymore. So that's why the answer of Buddhism comes, and it is much deeper, because it speaks about an existential pain. I think this changed the perspective of what suffering is. It wasn't just a moral suffering, it was something much deeper. And they were finding out. And it was finally thinking in a different way. And they also are struck by another thing. Buddhist tradition that talks about suffering of all sentient beings. No one had ever talked about this, because the theological game of monotheism where they grew up was saying, oh, the problem of evil, the problem of pain is a matter between me and God. Jobe, goes against God, but behind him there's a dog, there's a forest. And suddenly they tell him, look at the suffering of the parched earth, the suffering of animals. species that are going extinct. It's easy to say my dog is not good. It's Buddhism that tells this to them. It's an existential suffering. And this is the key that changes the game. The suffering of these animals is deeper, and you are reflected in that. And then it's the way with which, and I think this also convinced them, the way in which Buddhism that they were studying helps them to see the situation in different eyes.
And also to approach it, they had plenty of rhetorical instruments. Fortunately, this generation have forgotten them. But when they heard that the problem of suffering, that Buddhism solved not in attracting suffering, but in going deep into suffering to be transformed. That wasn't easy, but it was a new opening. And it was a perspective that invited them to be benevolent. Can you feel the calm? To have a serene detachment. You can perceive the emphasis of the Christian tradition, like love. Love is like one of those huge ice creams that you eat and then you're fed up with it. It's true. It's true. They speak of love. They don't understand. They don't have a good look in their eyes. It's easy to talk about love. It's more difficult to understand that it is a form of attachment. Because if you have attachment, you look like a bad guy. Well, they say you have to have this serene detachment. They talk about the attachment when they understood that love can be a form of domination. I will stop here, but it's not a coincidence that all words and languages talking about love say, I own you. What? What do you mean? You own nobody. You do not own anyone. You respect, if you love. You don't touch it. And then they discovered compassion, karuna. Compassion was a very difficult thing to conquer because there was really the idea of, loving nature, and that's it. It was different. In the Karuna virtue, there is a position of listening, which finally is a virtue that invites you to silence. Think of our tradition, the tradition that they had to confront, United States of the 1970s, white Protestant America. Maximalist, integralist, extremist as a form of Christianity. They told, love your neighbor and then go with a flag. And the other one is saying, shut up, listen to pain and let the pain of everyone, let pain be your pain. In the common illusion of my own existence, your pain is my pain. Can you feel this sense of annihilation? And the sense of emptiness enters into ecology right here. We shouldn't be surprised if all of these guys were Gandhi supporters in their own way. They understood that this innocence is right, is the right look. So deep ecology becomes a moral way. It's not a way of understanding what nature is and how to defend nature. No, it was a way of being. It is a way of being. And here we understand the relative success of this ecology. So we can say today that that was a prophetic view of Ananias. He talks about the network of the world seen as a continuity of relations because of this substratum. This is what impressed them. It's the key that they needed. And it's not sunyata. They got there slowly. So I want to underline that it was a gradual shift, not with the schemes that we now use. What is Buddhism? Is the non-I, ana, and all the rest. But they got there later because that's the most difficult step. But what impressed them gradually is this sequence. Pain, everybody's pain. I look at it with compassion because it's one, and that's Indra's network or net. So the concept of Indra's net and the concept of interconnection is common in Asia. I'm not saying that they teach you in summer school and someone is punishing you if you don't understand it and don't remember it, but they eat it with rice because it's in many, many sutras, directly or indirectly. What they see is something innovative, which was not so in Asia, but for the American and now also for the European world was. That is the dependent origin. And this overturns the concepts of causality that they were used to, because saying that the world is interconnected at that time was obvious. All scientists know that the world is interconnected. Starting from Newton, it's the way in which you see it. It's the metaphor that needed to be changed. The metaphor on which everything was based, not just science, but the view of the world, was that of a wash, the perfect wash, where all organisms follow the click-clack, the rhythm. It was the prime cause, the linear cause of the wash. There was a design that was created, and it's a compact, enclosed design because it was God's will. Nothing comes from outside, and nothing will get out of the project. So it's this wash, this machine, it will work because it has a purpose. And then you tell them that this universe, the metaphor is here, the universe is alive. It's something alive. So first, the only thing that was alive was humans. Whereas now what they are saying is that the universe is alive, is dynamic, and it changes, and it's all interconnected. But the net is rhizomatic, and you cannot stop it. You can feel the freedom, the sense of freedom. And so this is what attracted them. And then everything is enlightened. So God gets into the vision in a different manner. It continues to be a religious vision, but, the look is addressed inside. The fact that it was an illuminated universe was clear to the green ecology, because they saw the unity between the monotheistic tradition, so the universe is a creature of God, so man is made in the likelihood of God, which leads them to say that everything belongs to God. Internet is the enlightenment per se, it's light. It's beautiful to look at these connections with the hypothesis of James Lovelock, a scientist. I didn't know this person, and then I investigated and I understood that he was the one who claimed that the Earth was an homeostatic organism, a chemically and physically complex organism that lives. The Earth defends itself against human attacks, and it reacts as if it were a virus, a pulsing virus. From a scientific viewpoint, he was harshly criticized. But for Buddhist ecologists, he was the missing link. There were people like Johann Massimo and John Seed who put forward the hypothesis of Gaia. And it was a winning proposal. So this universe is already the pattern of the universe coming to the surface. Scientists, physicists, cosmologists would see it. The complex rhizomatic network was clear to them. It's their metaphor. But when you say it's the Earth, and the Earth is alive, it's full, and it creates, and in fact it was called Dharma Gaia. So you feel that it is a self-organized entity, and it's a community of subjects. There is no more distinction between objects. The Mother Earth is all of us. There is no longer a living being and a non-living being. And they called it Dharma Gaia because it's the light of truth. But they also added another detail, and we have to add it to the mix of this process. Gaia, this homeostatic, pulsing and living entity, is female. It's called Mother Earth. It's a very old concept, that of the Mother Earth. It depends on how you interpret it. But the feminist movement of that time immediately understood its value and its significance, because behind that there was a detachment from God. There was a different way of looking at man and the universe and its destiny. And all this strategy is very much female-oriented. So what opens up is a very interesting relationship, because it's a conflicting relations. Very often, cultural processes are not just one way. If they're creative, they're disruptive, they generate discussions, debates, and questions, but it's good. It's a good thing. In this case, this mixture is very controversial, because the whole part of the ecologist movement, especially the feminist movement, said it's a fair metaphor, it's the right metaphor. They said the Mother Earth, the way we are experiencing it, is feminine because we value its sense of harmony, equality, lack of hierarchy, its value of free creativity. So all positive attributes linked to the feminine, but there is another feminist current that rejected it and said, why? Why this combination between feminine and mother? As if a woman were only framed as a mother, which is a metaphor that has always linked women or cornered women to the role of a mother. And it's, the role of a mother attributed to women is one that was attached and forced onto them by patriarchal societies. So they are sort of saying, we are mothers, which also means that if we are free, and it's absolutely right, if we are free, if nature is free, then nature is a stepmother in a way. So nature, if it doesn't produce, is a stepmother. If nature produces because of the rain, nature is a mother. I have to underline something that I was pondering on, and I invite you to ponder too. They were not alone. In the same period, in the monotheistic world, there were voices of theologists, men and women, in the Christian and also in the Muslim worlds, who reread the Bible and spoke of the feminine nature of God. Finally, he dropped the beard. He no longer has white hair, gray hair, but it takes on the look of a woman. And it's interesting to see how they delved into the Bible, and they also looked for, hints of what was hidden. In my opinion, this debate is obsolete now. Quite rightly so. I think that we started talking about a body without a gender connotation. But that was a time of battles. There was now surpassed by a more elaborate view of the world. I'd like to take you also through another step. This unity, this complexity of a pulsing alive network comes to a stage which is a Buddhist step. That is, it communicates, it talks. It's good to say that nature talks. Nobody said it before. Nature had always been behind. And instead, they found a very deep spiritual tradition, such as Buddhism, that said every element of nature, Hoshin Seppo, preaches the truth. You can feel the beauty. It said in the Lotus Sutra, chapter 2, it's in the Zen tradition. Also, non-sentient beings talk to you and communicate. And then there is a whole tradition of Shingon Buddhism. Yekuka talks of preaching, of also non-sentient beings, the grass, the woods. There are beautiful passages there. We were used, the entire American and European culture was used to thinking that God speaks. Because if we want to take a critical look at it, we have to get rid of the rhetoric whereby men look for God. It's not true. Humans are not looking for God. The deepest traditions actually say the opposite. It's God looking for men. Where are you, Abraham? Oh, I'm sorry. Think of poor Abram. He was 110 years old. He retired. He finally had a few goes with the old lady with him, and a voice came saying, Abraham, where are you? He felt a little like a little man. He tried to hide away, and the voice said, start on your path. This is a message that is given by all spiritual tradition. So the absolute calls on you. And then there is a fight, because I was speaking with some shamans, and they said, I heard the calling. I heard it, and I didn't want it. I fought against God. It's true, you fight with God, because following God is difficult. It hurts. You have to give up on yourself. And you know it. And God calls you. And that's the biblical definition, which is wonderful. The voice of a subtle silence. I've never read of a more beautiful definition of the voice of God. In our definition, it's God speaking to men. And here a message comes saying, shut up and listen. You are silence, and the silence is full of voices. Plural. Voices are languages, not just one verbal languages. think of the text talking about the language, the body language, the language of the mind. These are the languages of Bodhisattva and the language of the stones in the mountains. This had a key importance on the message. It means that everything speaks and everything says some truth. And I am also part of this discourse. Feelings and senses come into play. Speaking about the body languages and the language of the voice means talking about the bodily, so full acceptance of nature results, because it's nature that looks for you and guides you. So a new virtue was born. Now, this is American ecologism. Massimo said it in Active Hope, beautiful book written in 2012, sorry. We should cultivate a new virtue, which is gratitude, and it's wonderful. It looks like karuna, looks like compassion in a different manner, because also this one is a silent virtue, and it's a virtue of changing perspective and saying, I live because someone thought of me, and I think because someone thought of me. And they thought of me with compassion because someone understood me, because someone guided me and could see me, and I let them guide me with gratitude. Because everything that's nature, and I get to the key concept, is a gift. Is a gift. There is an ancient idea, i.e., that the body and mind of the universe, there's this beautiful view of the universe in a state of deep concentration, is a Shingon view, and this is reflected in my body and mind. So it's a combination. And it's beautiful because it means to accept this, that this unity, myself and the universe, are transient, but truth is transient itself. It took a while for people to accept this. Why? Because there is always a temptation to say, but this is true in all traditions. The line stops with Hinduism. Everything changes. Everything is impermanent. We understand this easily. It's like discovering hot water. The problem comes later because all traditions added a small word, yet, or but, full stop. They put a full stop. Everything changes. Everything is impermanent. That's it. Full stop. They didn't want to say something else because the only thing that is not impermanent is emptiness. We're getting there, which is the key point of the encounter with ecology. And when you write, I finally understood clearly that the mind is only rivers, mountains, sun, moon, and stars. So what does it mean? It means that everything is impermanent. I am impermanent. If everything is light or enlightenment, I am also impermanent. Also, my enlightenment is impermanent. But also, illusions are enlightenment. I get goosebumps to feel how they see the world differently. We started from Kerouac, and now ecologism is talking about impermanent enlightenment. It talks of illusion being enlightenment, but illusions are the world. It's me. Now, what are the crucial choices that this encounter between Buddhism and ecology or ecological thinking in a deep way will have to face? In my opinion, there are two. The first is that it's good to say, and you also experience it in meditation, the beautiful meditation, including Taoist meditation of the identity between the body and the universe. But if I think that the universe is me and its emptiness, then I have a choice. And so I open my hands and let my eye drop. But if I think that I can interpret the identity between the universe and myself as I am the universe, and I close my fist and I dominate the universe, that's the old temptation. Goes back to Adam. There is a deep wisdom in all these traditions, the ego coming out. That's a choice, but it's not a theoretical choice. It's going to be a difficult choice because saying it, reading it in text is easy. But this is the real challenge for Buddhism in a society like post-capitalist society, which is global too. In Buddhist Asia, they have the same problem, this limitless ego that becomes the very heart of an ideology, which is all centered on the development of the ego. That's a challenge. And the two positions cannot be mediated. If you look at Star Wars, they said, may energy be with you. They looked for mediation. I laughed at that. If they made the movie 30 years, if they had made the movie 30 years before, they would have said, let God be with you, may God be with you. And I don't, if Yoda were a real Buddhist, he would have said, forget about it and go. They couldn't. You could feel the conflict. So they found a compromise. And they said, may the energy be with you. It's a hybridization. I don't want to judge, but this is a challenge. The challenge is to see how a tradition will face this problem. And then there is a second problem. Well, once I understand that my safety is the safety of others. If I do good to the others, that's my good. If I hurt others, I hurt myself. So where is our salvation? And I'm talking in view of engaged Buddhism. Where is the central node? It's not practical commitment. It's simple. A religious person would do it. I go to a poor man. I console a suffering person. I visit inmates in prison. Buddhists would do that. Everybody would do that. The issue is to ask yourself, why is that poor person poor? Why is 3/4 of the prisoners in American prisons of black origin? So you have to look at the upstream questions. The earth has been exploited. Ask yourself why. What are the political and economic reasons for that? That's a challenge. Can I intervene? Should I intervene? But it's not easy, even if you want to. It's not easy because there are objections also on the other side that are legitimate. They could say, if you think that reality is emptiness, if everything is an illusion, what are you doing? You're pursuing an illusion. You're not grasping dreams, you're just reiterating them. Or your discourse, if it is a public discourse of a general political economic reasons that lead to suffering, if you're engaged, what do? You get passionate, of course, but there is also frustration, anger, disappointment, and so more illusions. It's not that you have a one-to-one relationship with a person. You have an anonymous relationship with processes that are very often bigger than you. Professor Magno underlined one thing yesterday, and it's absolutely correct. Voting could be obsessive. Public roles could be an obsession. The risk is that you become an extremist because you defend the flag, and the flag becomes a dogma, and the dogma kills the process of truth that you had triggered. So it's complex. What is the answer then? I'd like to close with a positive view. I'm sure that the tradition of Buddhist teachers is courageous. It's not only pessimistic. It will go forward because it's a very free world, spiritually speaking. So they will not look for a mediation. I'm tempted to say they will find an answer. It's not true. Their strength will be their ability to ask for more questions, and they will continue to ask questions. They will continue to raise critical questions. That's the privilege of such a great tradition. They always believed that the questions were key. The doubts themselves were their spiritual path to give society the idea that you're really master of yourself and that your freedom can be conquered with your mind, with your mistakes, and with your choices. Thank you.